right. Thank you, Sherry. Morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm guessing it's actually afternoon for most of you. Well, welcome. So, like Sherry said, Dr. Jeremy Sharp, I'm a licensed psychologist, and I host the Testing Psychologist podcast, which is a podcast aimed at helping folks grow and scale their assessment-based practices. So I'm excited to chat with y'all this morning about private practice and some specific ways to set up your practice so that it is a little more enjoyable to you. If you are here, I'm guessing there have been some times when you have not loved your practice, and that's okay. That's pretty normal. It's what we all go through from time to time, but we're going to hopefully talk about some things that will be more likely to help you love your practice. So let's jump into it. I'm going to start with a story. So back in 2015, maybe 2016, my practice was not in a place where I was loving it. I had loved it previous to that. I started in 2009. It was pretty smooth sailing for a while. But once I started to grow, things got a little more complicated. So in about 2016, I had no billing team. I was doing about 20 comprehensive neuropsych evals a month, which for me, the way I do my evals is about 300 hours. So that's like 75, 80 hours a week. My days were completely scattered. I was doing intakes, feedbacks, testing, admin, returning phone calls, managing my two clinicians that I had hired at that point, trying to do billing and collect on all the money that I was theoretically making. And I was melting down behind the scenes of all of this. And all I wanted to do was escape this practice. I was fantasizing relentlessly about how to close the practice and, go be a barista. That's all our dream second jobs, right? So I have been there. I say all this to say I have been there. And that was really an inflection point for me. That's when I hired a business coach for the first time and really dove deep into running a business on purpose. So that's why we're talking about loving your practice. I know what it's like to not love your practice, because, practice can quickly go from like this fun adventure that you are embarking on and you're all excited in the beginning and you're getting referrals and you're getting your website set up and making some money, but it can quickly turn to kind of a slog and honestly a huge drain on your energy, unless you're deliberate about implementing some strategies to guard against that. And like I said, this coach of mine framed it once as having a business on purpose rather than just letting the business happen to you. So that's what we're going to do today, is hopefully introduce a little bit more purpose into your business. As far as the agenda, we'll talk just a bit about numbers and financial literacy. If you got nervous just hearing about that, that's totally okay. Take a breath. We'll talk about establishing a predictable schedule and why that's important. We'll talk about setting and measuring realistic goals, emphasis on the realistic. It's easy to set goals, not always easy to make sure they're realistic ones. So we'll cover each of those things. We'll spend, 10 or 15 minutes on each topic. As we go along, I always say one thing before we totally dive in is that I think that I have put together some content that could be helpful for you. But the truth is, I do not know what matters most to you in each of these topics. And so if you want to go deeper on a certain aspect of this presentation, or you have even a topic adjacent question, not quite hitting the mark, feel free to throw it out there. The Q&A is there for a reason, and I will be looking at it pretty regularly through the presentation. So I greatly prefer to do questions as we go along and sort of incorporate them into the presentation rather than just let me talk for an hour. That sounds boring and terrible, to be honest. So throw your questions in the chat or in the Q&A rather than saving them all to the end. And we'll get to them as it makes sense to do so. We will also have some Q&A at the end, if that works better for you. All right, let's do this. Just to set a little bit of a frame here. Private practice. I'm guessing some of you have been in private practice for quite a while. Some of you have been in private practice for less time, and that's okay. But the frame that I'm coming from here is that a business has to happen on purpose. I am relentless with this idea. So I have a 10 and a 12-year-old kid, daughter and son, respectively. And my son came to me with the idea probably 2 years ago. This is actually pretty good. I was kind of proud of him. He said, I want to buy a bunch of candy at Costco and get it for really cheap and then take it to school and sell it to all my friends because they don't sell candy at school and I could charge them more than what I bought it for. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Now, little did he know that he was getting himself into running a business on purpose, because I was like, no, we cannot just like leap into this, right? So we sat down, we figured out, we kind of ballparked the demand for the candy, the unit price if he bought it in bulk, and then the price that the market, sixth graders, would bear for this candy. And then we talked a little bit about profit margin and how he could either like walk away with that money or reinvest it and, figure out what to do with it. So, as I retell the story, I'm kind of thinking it's a wonder that he even sat still for that long without forgetting what he wanted to do in the first place. But moral of the story is I'm a big fan of putting on the business owner hat immediately when you start a practice. And if you didn't do that, or if you don't think of yourself as a business owner at this point, that's okay. Maybe now's that moment. You become a real business owner. So just take a moment and kind of reflect on the identity and the extent to which you embrace the identity of being a business owner. Okay. Not just a psychologist or a mental health practitioner, but an actual business owner, because that's what you became the moment you started your private practice. And so being a business owner means you have to act like one. So to that end, you got to commit. It's not a game, as the slide says here. And what I mean by that is that even if you are part-time, go all in on this private practice. Dedicate yourself to the private practice. It's not something, I hear people sometimes say like, I'm trying private practice or I'm playing around with private practice. I don't love that. This is something that takes a lot of responsibility and energy. And I don't think it's something to just play at. So yeah, go hard onto your private practice. Put the energy into it. Everything that we're going to talk about today is going to be relevant for part-time, full-time, solo, group. These are just core business principles for running a practice. And as far as the freedom component, private practice is amazing. I've been in private practice, like I said, since 2009. And back then, the reason I started was because I honestly just did not want to attend another meeting that I was not running myself. I'd worked in universities and other settings up to that point, and I was just so tired of meetings. And that still continues to this day. The freedom is incredible. The flexibility is incredible. You can do whatever you want, but you have to also be ready to accept the consequences. So as you've heard, great freedom brings great responsibility. And there's a lot of responsibility with private practice. So just setting our frame a little bit, getting in the mindset of being a quote unquote real business owner. So I'd love to start by talking about one of the areas of greatest responsibility, and that is finances. So let me see. I'm going to check in on the questions and see what we've got going on before I move forward. Okay. Yeah. So question about scaling. I think we can talk about that. That'll come up as we talk about finances and scheduling. This individual, Karen, is very cautious with time and doesn't want to become overwhelmed, which is awesome. But curious about how to scale slowly. Okay, we could think about that. We can frame that within the goals for sure. And then David said, I get a lot of psychology online practice marketing pitches, most related to generating a greater client base, developing a cash-based practice. They all appear similar. Feel like a way for a person offering the course to make money themselves by preying upon gullible, desperate practitioners. Oh man, this is a big question. So David, I will answer this right now, actually, because I'm sure you've all seen these things. It's, there's Therapy Practice Accelerator. There's there are different people and their own methods. I think there's a woman named Nicole who does this. Anyway, lots of marketing pitches to build your private practice. Truth be told, a few are great. Most are probably terrible. So it's hard without looking at each one individually to be able to say, hey, this is good, or this is not good, or this is going to help or not help. I will say that a big consistent theme with all of them is just how much time and energy you're willing to put into it. No one's going to do it for you. So, either whatever you choose, if you choose to go down that path, you do need to be willing to put a lot of time and energy into it. Nothing is that easy. But David, maybe we could take it offline. I mean, or if we have time, if you have specific examples in mind, I might be able to share some thoughts on some of the programs. I know some of them pretty well, some of them not so well. Okay. So for those of y'all who are looking at this slide and are thinking, oh my God, math and finances. Yeah, if anybody just threw up a little, that's totally okay. It's totally okay. It's kind of a normal reaction for this kind of thing. Math and finances, business finances in particular, can be pretty scary for a lot of folks. Myself included. Full disclosure, I consider myself a numbers person, and I lean into our finances a lot. But there are still times during the month or certain points of the year where I'll hold my breath a little bit when I'm looking at the finances. So it's okay. This is a thing that a lot of people struggle with. And we could go super deep on money mindset and messages around money from growing up and the emotions around it. I'm not going to do that. That's a whole other presentation. But I do want to talk with you a little bit just about basic financial literacy and numbers in your practice and what you might pay attention to when you think about finances. So I think about financial literacy. It's a unique combination of actually two kinds of literacy. Quantitative literacy, which is the ability to understand and interpret numbers, okay? And prose literacy, which is what we think of as general literacy, like being able to read text and understand what it's saying. So just words. But for financial literacy, you need basic understanding of math, but you also need to know a relatively small set of terms involved in business finances. And typically, it also extends out to budgeting and saving and investing and that sort of thing. But we'll stick to the basics here today. So let's talk about some big picture ideas. Now, if you take away nothing from this presentation, I would be content if you just leave with some amount of increased motivation and willingness to dive deeper into your numbers and get more comfortable, get more intimate with your practice finances. So with that in mind, let's go for it. Metrics. Let's talk about metrics a little bit. Does anybody know, and I'm realizing all of a sudden I'm not going to be able to know if you know, does anybody know right offhand what the most important metric is for your practice in terms of a number that you want to pay attention to, or a KPI, a key performance indicator, and that's like a corporate term. And you can, let's sort of co-opt the Q&A a little bit and almost use it like a chat. So put your guesses in there. Does anybody know what the most important metric is in your practice? I'll wait just a second, see if any guesses show up in the Q&A. We can treat it like Jeopardy. You can ask it like a question so that it's a true Q&A. All right. We have a guess of profit. Anybody else? Revenue? Question mark. Good guess. Okay. Thank you all for playing. Stephen, I'm going to disqualify your answer because you didn't ask it in the form of a question. Oh man, we're getting a bunch. Okay. Yes. So profit is the most important metric for your practice. Now, we could argue, lots of people would argue about this for years, but I like to keep it super simple. I think profit is the most important metric in your practice. Why? Because without profit, you cannot do anything, okay? It's like oxygen for your practice. So what is profit and how do we find it? The good news is that profit is literally the easiest calculation to do, math-wise. It is basic addition and subtraction. So addition, we add up all of your income, all the income, so all the deposits that went into your bank account for your business. It could be per month, it could be per quarter, 3-month period, it could be per year. But you pick a period, you add all of your income together, and then you pick the same period and you subtract all of the expenses. So all of the money you spent on anything in your business. And whatever is left is your profit. So simple example, you made $10,000 last month in your private practice. You spent $6,000 on rent, software, testing materials, meals. You have a profit of $4,000. Okay. So profit, super simple, super important. The more profitable your business is, the more of a cushion you have, the more flexibility you have. I would say the more freedom you have to do things in your practice. Quick target to shoot for. People ask this all the time. What should my profit be? It varies greatly depending on what stage of practice you're at. But for most mental health practices, unless you're a large group practice, I'm talking like over 20, 25, 30 practitioners, your profit margin should be at least 20%. Okay. So again, on that 10,000 example, you should be profiting at least $2,000. Okay. And as you're a solo practitioner, it's typically higher. It goes down as you grow in most cases. Okay, so that's profit. That's it. That's the most important metric we want to track. You could argue that this is the only metric to track. If you're not profitable, you're bankrupt. But let's look at a couple of other metrics. I was about to make a Twitter joke and pull Elon Musk into this, but I'm not going to do that. Other metrics you could look at. Revenue. Okay. Revenue is just how much you make. That is also called gross income. It's just all the money that you make before expenses. I think it's important to track that if you have the time and the energy. Expenses, how much you spend. So again, literally everything that you spend in your practice. This is it runs the gamut, but every single dollar that goes out of your practice for any reason is an expense. I think it's important to track the percentage that you are collecting. So how much of what you should make that you actually got paid for. So I know very few practices actually that collect 100% of their billed hours. But if you're private pay, you should be shooting for 98 or 99%. If you're insurance based, you should be shooting for 96 or 97%. So some of that's going to get lost because of rejected claims or people not paying or credit cards declining and clients running away or whatever. But shoot for high 90s for sure for percent of collections. A couple other things that I like to look at are cash on hand. So this is different than profit. This is like all of your assets that you have in your practice. Um, you know, Historical amounts that kind of sit in savings or checking. It's not just the profit you made during that particular period, but the total money, the total assets that you have that quote unquote belong to your practice. And this is important because I think it gives a little bit of a broader view than simply looking at profit during a given period. I mean, you could be very profitable for a year, but if you were digging yourself out of 5 years of being unprofitable, then the story is a little more complicated than just being profitable for that year. And then honorable mention for what to track is something called the aging report. So, like I said, I started my practice in 2009, and I didn't discover the aging report in my practice until about 2013. It was in my EHR. I just never took the time to look at it or care about it or knew that I should be looking at it. It's kind of crazy to think about that right now. So the aging report is the report that tells you who owes you what money. Basically, what money is still out there to be collected, both from insurance, if you take insurance, and from clients. So when I checked my aging report 4 years into starting my private practice, there was about $90,000 on this aging report between insurance and clients. And I kind of lost it a little bit in my office that day. And since then, I've been relentless about checking the aging report. So it gets an honorable mention in our metrics to track. If you use any EHR software, it should easily track your aging and how much money is still out there. Okay, so we could get even more granular, but I don't want to overcomplicate it. Think of it like this. If you were on your ideal vacation, having an awesome time, you are totally relaxed, which numbers could make you decide to stay or come home immediately, depending how good or bad they are? Those are the ones that you want to be tracking. And again, I make an argument for the 4 or 5 that I threw out just a bit ago. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is all great. How do I get these numbers? And this is where a couple simple tools or steps can come into play. If you're not using accounting software in your practice, you need to do that today. You have my permission to multitask and go sign up for QuickBooks right now. So QuickBooks is super cheap accounting software that can automatically run reports to give you all of the numbers that I just mentioned. Super easy. It's built into the software. You don't even have to really tell it what to do. It almost does it automatically for you. I'm a big fan of QuickBooks. There are others out there. There are some free options. QuickBooks is, I think, $40 a month and totally worth it. Totally worth it. And let's see, if you don't want to keep track of the finances yourself, and I don't know why you would, you can hire somebody to do it for you. A bookkeeper is an easy investment. Again, maybe $50, maybe $100 a month for a small solo practice. And that person is the one who goes in and organizes all your expenses and your income in your accounting software. And then they give you these nice, beautiful reports at the end of each month. And it tells you exactly what you spent and how much you made and what your profit is and what percentage that is of your income. And it's so easy. So my top two tools, quote unquote, for financial metrics are QuickBooks and a bookkeeper. Super easy. You can get people like, build dashboards and you can go really deep into this stuff. But honestly, if you're just trying to get a better handle on your numbers, do QuickBooks, get a bookkeeper, and it's going to increase your financial literacy about 1,000%. And if you're starting from nothing or have no idea what I just said in the last 10 minutes, that's totally okay. You are not alone. When I jump into consulting with practice owners, you would maybe be shocked at how many practice owners literally have no idea what their numbers look like. And that's a big topic of conversation. So let's see, questions. Someone asked about EHR software. Big discussion. I will keep it super simple and say we use therapy notes in our practice. I love therapy notes. There are some downsides, but all in all, I've tried a lot of EHRs. I've reviewed a bunch of EHRs. I love therapy notes. A lot of people use Simple Practice. I don't love it as much. So I would keep it simple, recommend therapy notes. You said, can I still use paper for record keeping and electronic report and electronic billing? I mean, you can use paper. I don't know why you would, honestly. I don't know why you'd split your systems unless you just like to write notes by hand, which is fine. Yeah, just think about where do you keep them, and do you have like paper files? Where do those go? Do you store them? Do you scan them? So I'm a big fan of moving everything to electronic. And if you have to do handwritten notes, can you do it on an iPad or some kind of tablet that will sync with the EHR in a HIPAA compliant way? All right. Let's see, a couple questions. Do you know anything about QuickBooks invoicing for collecting payments? I do. It's easy in a non-private practice. I don't know how we would use it for private practice because there are simply so many appointments that you have to keep track of. I would much rather just use the built-in payment collection, that's built into any EHR system. So I use QuickBooks invoicing for one of my other businesses, and it's great, but I think it'd be really cumbersome to use in a private practice, especially because it doesn't sync with your client record. And then, how do you get them back and forth between the two systems? That kind of thing. Let me see. Do the integrated EHR platforms that have Stripe integrated already run the financial reports for you? To a degree, yeah. So what EHR platforms will mostly do is give you an income report and an aging report. So they'll tell you your revenue. Most EHRs will not do expenses. That's why I think a full featured accounting software like QuickBooks makes sense. It's kind of the full package. An EHR typically only gives you the revenue half and the the client accounting, like the aging part. So yeah, I like QuickBooks. Stephen said, what's my opinion about Simple Practice? Great for forms, great for the portal, not great for customer service, and it's pretty expensive at this point. Yep, Fairness does billing. Can I say one more sentence about why I prefer therapy notes to Simple Practice? Yeah, 2 words, customer service. It's easy to get somebody on the phone. They're super responsive, knowledgeable. 2 more words, developmental integrity. I don't know what I'm trying to say. They roll out features that are super solid, even though they might take a little bit longer to do so. So the main knock on therapy notes is that their client portal and paperwork is not as flexible or customizable as some of the other platforms, but we're getting in the weeds here, but the architecture and the software development behind the system, I think, is really, really solid. And they've been very deliberate about rolling out features that work. So let's see, Fairness, we talked about that. Suggestions to improve flow if you find it slowing after being consistent. Don't have the name recognition. Any suggestions? Oh gosh. So that's getting into marketing, and that is a big topic. I'm going to hold that. That's actually a big topic. We might be able to tackle that like in goals, or even scheduling a little bit. So let's hold tight. And yes, I will use full names. I'm sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. So EHR is just electronic health record. Does therapy notes work with neuropsych eval practice? Yes, absolutely. That is our practice to a T. So we have I'm the director now of our practice, which is about 40 practitioners, and we're pretty evenly split between neuropsych testing and counseling, and it works great. All right, let's jump into scheduling. So some of y'all might be saying scheduling's boring. What does that even mean? Why are we talking about scheduling? If you have listened to my podcast at all, you know that I go hard on scheduling. I think scheduling is an unsung hero of a sustainable practice. And here's why. So when I say scheduling, I mean, this is the deliberate process of setting up your practice to be consistent and predictable and manageable. So there are many things in our practices that we cannot control, right? Like we can't control when the phone rings or who calls necessarily, or even if they're going to pay, and how much they're going to pay. But we can control our schedules, and having a consistent, predictable schedule that works for you is one of the most important things you could do to make a sustainable practice. I hear a lot how, especially in neuropsych practices, how people get overwhelmed, how they don't have time to write reports, they're working on the weekends, everything's scattered. So I'm a big fan of scheduling. Why? I've given a couple reasons, but one thing that I lean on a lot is it saves you precious cognitive resources. Okay, so I'm going to talk in a minute about task switching and how that doesn't work well on a micro level. But just big picture, if you know what your days and weeks look like, it's going to save you countless internal deliberations about when you should be scheduling your appointments or what you should be doing. You don't want to be on the phone with someone trying to book an appointment and say, maybe, let me think about it and get back to you, or let me try to move some things around. I mean, that just burns unnecessary energy that you could be spending on much more important things. So it's good for you. It saves cognitive resources. It's easier for your clients, to have predictability in their own schedules, especially if you're doing any kind of therapy and, consistent weekly appointments. And then I think it helps keep you focused, and it just lets you maximize your time, which is the most precious resource as we get older. So as far as an ideal schedule, this is typically an exercise that I will do with folks over at least a half hour. So we're not going to do the full ideal schedule exercise, but this is one of those little things that I hope you might do after the webinar, where you can sit down and spend some time looking at your schedule and determining what your ideal schedule might be. And the way that I approach this is a little bit different. So instead of saying that you're going to work from 8 to 5 each day, so basically like starting with your work hours, okay, I'm going to work from 8 to 5. I would encourage you to come at it from the other direction. So what I'd like you to do, again, after the call, is to flip forward in your calendar. If it's a paper calendar, that's fine. Flip the pages. Or if it's an electronic calendar, also fine. Just click ahead. But the idea is to get to the first fully open week that you have, right? Whenever that is. The timing is not really that important. You just need an open blank week on your calendar. And what you're going to do is put in all of the personal time that is important to you in your life. When I say personal time, I mean sleep, drop off, pick up if you have kids or dependents, working out, meals, dates with a partner or friends, downtime, anything personal. Okay. So nothing work related. put in all of those things in your blank week. And then whatever is left over is your work time. And these are the hours that you have available to run your practice, both the clinical time and the administrative time. Now, some of you may be saying, oh my God, that's impossible. If I did all that, I would not have any time to work. And, that's maybe telling, right? So I'm not saying that this has to be done immediately by any means. And it's also called your ideal schedule. So not necessarily a realistic schedule in all cases. People have come back to me with pretty wild schedules. Like, I want to work. I have 7.5 hours to work. Like, okay, let's work with that. So keep that in mind. But the idea, again, is to create a schedule that is actually sustainable for you. It is so easy for your practice to run out of control, except for Karen, who is apparently very cautious and could probably teach us all how to not be overwhelmed by her practice. But a lot of folks I talk to tend to get overwhelmed and let work like bleed into everything. Okay, so that's the ideal schedule exercise. Take a half hour sometime this week and do that for yourself and see if anything changes, right? Just to be a little bit more deliberate about your schedule. Let's see. Now, as far as actual strategies for scheduling, I'm going to talk about a few things that have really helped me over the years just dial in the time that I do have. And, full disclosure, my personal schedule right now is I basically, I did the ideal schedule exercise, and I essentially work from like 9 to 3, Monday to Thursday, and we'll call it 11. No, we'll call it 9 to 11 on Fridays. That's my ideal schedule. And that's the time that I have. So the time that I do work, has to be pretty efficient. So let's talk about some strategies. Before I dive into any of these strategies, I want to touch on the concept of something called attention residue. Some of you may have heard of this concept. So attention residue is the idea that every time we switch tasks, we lose some cognitive efficiency because the quote unquote residue from the previous task is keeping us from focusing on the new task, the task at hand. This is well documented in the literature. It's a thing. I forget the exact number of seconds that your attention is disrupted when you switch tasks, or minutes. It's actually minutes, but it's a thing. So imagine that this happens literally hundreds of times per day. If you are like most people, like maybe you're writing some notes or a report, then you get a notification on your phone from Instagram, then you look at your email. I mean, it's just like attention residue all over the place. And you're not focusing on the important things, right? Whatever the important thing was back at the beginning. So we're not going to, we cannot fix this distraction problem in this webinar. If we could, that would be amazing, but it's a societal kind of thing. But we can talk about some easy ways to increase the likelihood of getting more deep work done, or just saving some energy from task switching all the time. So first thing, simple strategy, you might even call this a hack, right? Is turning on do not disturb on your phone and your computer. So this is super easy and not many people do it, but it works wonders. So most phones, you can make this a location-based thing. So for me, I have it set where if I am within a half-mile radius of my office, it goes into like what's called do not disturb work mode, and nobody can get through. My phone does not ring. Only, you can specify the people you do want to get through. So it's my wife and kids, essentially. Otherwise, nothing. So I have to manually go in and check each of the apps if I want to see what's going on in them. But no notifications from email, messaging, social media, anything like that. And that has honestly worked wonders. So that's a simple one. You don't really have to do anything with your schedule. Just turn on do not disturb on your phone and computer. But if we want to get into specific like scheduling strategies, let's talk first about one called time blocking. So time blocking is doing one thing at a time according to specific blocks on your schedule. That's it. It's super straightforward, but very hard to actually execute. So this just means you put blocks of time on your schedule, literally put them on your schedule. Like I have a half hour in the morning when I get to the office that says email, and that's when I check email. And I have another half hour at the end of the day that says email. I check email at the end of the day. That's pretty good. If you're writing reports, 2 hours for writing reports. If you're returning phone calls, an hour for returning phone calls. And the idea here is that you do the task that you're meant to do. So you close all the other tabs, you shut down your browser if you need to, you again already have your phone on do not disturb, hopefully. You're just doing the thing that is on your calendar. But you have to put it on your calendar. You can't just like think in your head, hey, I'm gonna do email from 10 to 10:30. Putting it on your calendar makes it much more likely you're gonna actually do it. Expanding that idea, there's something called day theming. This works really well in testing heavy practices. I think it works well in counseling practices as well. And this is essentially the idea that you're doing as few different activities per day as possible. So in our practice, our folks who do testing, they are doing intakes on Mondays. They do testing on Tuesday and Thursday. They do staff meetings and so forth on Wednesdays, and Fridays are report writing. So that's a very quick, simple example of day theming. So you try to keep your days as consistent as possible and as simple as possible, where you're only doing one thing. So if this is, if you run a counseling practice, this would be, maybe it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you see 6 counseling clients. Monday you do administrative work, and Fridays you write notes. I'm making this up, but you get the idea. So again, you're not task switching as much during the day. It just helps keep you in the zone. Let's see. The last one that I want to touch on is something called a think week. So this is big picture, blocking out time to give yourself an opportunity to work on your business instead of in your business. So you get out of the daily grind. You're not doing those daily minutiae, those tasks that you kind of have to do to keep the clinical part running. This is working on your business. This is thinking about your goals, which we're going to talk about in a minute. This is thinking about big picture stuff. This is visioning. So I like to block out at least 2 days every quarter to do this. It's called a think week, but you could do a think weekend. 2 days every quarter. Block them off. Leave them open. This is for big picture stuff, not the minutia. So before we move on to goals, I just, disclaimer with all these things, this is aspirational. If you're looking at your schedule and you're like, there is absolutely no way that I could do any of these things in the next 6 months. That's okay. If I were your coach, I'd probably push back a little bit on that, really. But when I talk with people about this in my consulting, we really are changing schedules slowly but surely over a 3 to 6 month period. It is a little bit like turning the Titanic. So totally okay. All right. Let's talk about goals. I'll tell you another secret about my business. I had 0 goals for my first 5 years in practice. And then took another little break from probably 2019 to 2020, where I was coasting on what I would call very vague goals. Now, what I found over the years is when I look back that having goals, even if they're poorly defined, is going to be 1,000% more helpful than not. It puts you in a proactive versus reactive place. It gives you clarity on your priorities, and it gives you more intimate understanding of your business, right? So it goes back to that business on purpose thing. you don't know what you're working toward or what you're doing in your business, then it's like treading water. So let's talk about goals, and I'll keep it relatively simple here. How do we determine goals? Well, the cool thing is when you start, I don't think it really matters. Like, just pick something to work toward, and we'll talk in just a second about how to refine them and make sure they're good, but just start with something. So you could do like a random slash, I call it a dreamy goal. Like, I want to live on the beach within 5 years. Sounds good. That sounds good. You could do a metric driven goal like income, number of clients, number of days off per year. So an example would be, I want to make $200,000 next year. Great. Okay. It's a metric driven goal. Or you could come at it from more of like a values perspective. Okay. Like, I want to develop a new service line for marginalized communities over the next 6 months. All right. These are all fabulous goals. You do have to make sure they're realistic, though. Oh, and just to call back, this is like perfect kind of work for those quarterly think sessions. Just FYI, if you're thinking like, what would I even do during those 2 days? Well, setting goals is good. So as far as expectations and making sure that goals are realistic, some of you may have heard of this concept of SMART goals. So, it's a little bit overplayed. Like, this is a, kind of corporate acronym thing that gets thrown around. But I really actually like the SMART goal framework as a place to start. It's a nice rubric just to help determine if your goals are actually doable. If they pass the SMART test, they're probably okay. And that means your expectations will be more likely to match the outcome, right? So what is a SMART goal? S stands for specific. So this is, my income will increase, which is relatively specific, versus I want my practice to be better. That's pretty vague. The M stands for measurable. So this is, I want to make 200,000 versus I want more money. Okay, you can measure 200,000. I'm going to stick with this 200,000 number for a few, as you will see. The A stands for attainable. So I want to make $200,000 versus I want to make 7 million. 7 million is probably not attainable next year for most of us. The R stands for relevant. So I want to make 200,000 versus I want to collect all the original Cabbage Patch dolls. I mean, that could be your thing, I suppose. But if we're talking about your practice, the income goal is probably a little more relevant. Timely. I want to make 200,000 in the next 12-month period versus I want to make 200,000 at some point in my life. Okay, so timely or time-driven is the T. You can find the SMART goal acronym anywhere on the internet. It's easily searchable. So if you walk through this whole, the SMART system, the chances are you're going to come out with a goal that's pretty realistic. If it passes through that rubric and hits all those points, you're probably in pretty good shape. Okay. So start big, write your goals down, and then put them through the SMART rubric to test them out and see if they're actually appropriate. As far as measuring, if you follow the SMART format, the actual measuring is pretty easy. It's literally one of those items. It's measurable. It's making the time to do it that can be hard. So for me, and in our practice, I alluded to this earlier, but I like to roll on a quarterly system. So there are several business thinkers who adopt this philosophy that it's pretty hard for us to focus on big projects or long-term goals for more than 3 months at a time. We just kind of like lose interest, and keeps the urgency there, but yet gives us enough time to actually tackle something relatively large. So for us, it's every January, April, July, and October. So we're setting new goals for our practice every quarter. If you're trying to figure out what they should be, I take this approach of I call them house on fire goals. So, prioritizing the things that if they didn't get done during that quarter, your practice is going to burn down. Probably not. But it gives it some urgency, right? We can get distracted by shiny object syndrome. Unless it is like absolutely crucial for you to establish an Instagram account for your practice, it's probably just a shiny object, right? So really try to prioritize based on the things, like if they don't happen, the practice is going under, period. As far as the checking and the measuring, I like to check in every week. So we have a larger practice, of course, but we have a standing 90-minute meeting every single week with our leadership team. And that's basically all we're doing is checking in on projects and goals to see about the progress toward those goals. If you're a solo practitioner, you can absolutely do a 60-minute meeting for yourself. Find another practitioner to serve as an accountability partner who will meet with you each week, or just like work with a coach to help keep you accountable. A friend, I mean, anybody can do it. It's just setting up a regular time, as we talked about with your schedule, to check in on your goals. Now, before we leave this topic, simple, easy cheat code for goals. You could do absolutely nothing from everything I just talked about over the last 10 minutes. If you only write the goals down, there's an 80% likelihood that you're going to achieve them, or 80% more likely, sorry, than if you hadn't written them down. So simply writing goals down is, again, almost a hack. Just write it down, look at it, keep track of it somewhere. All right, fast and furious. So much. If you're feeling like, drinking from a fire hose, that's totally okay. A little bit of a recap. What are we taking away today? I hope you're going to remember the phrase business on purpose. Within that, your numbers are important. If you're scared of math and scared of finances, it's worth doing some work to get some, maybe it takes some exposure therapy. It's kind of what I had to do, but it's worth doing some work to face that fear and get a better handle on your numbers. Scheduling is crucial. It's tempting to be flexible with folks, but I think consistency and boundaries in your schedule are more helpful for everyone. So set up your times for doing what you do and stick to them. I've had a million iterations of schedules over the 15 years I've been in practice, from not working Mondays to not working Fridays to doing evenings to not doing evenings to not doing weekends to doing weekends to, like 7 to noon versus 10 to 6. People come. People will come. Set your boundaries and stick to them. And then the last thing is goals are important. If nothing else, they give you a North Star to point toward. Otherwise, you're just navigating blind with no idea where you're headed. And that is not running a business on purpose. So goals are important. Kind of overplayed in the media and corporate structure, but goals are important. So if nothing else, I mean, we'll have a little time for some more questions here before we totally wrap up, but just take a second, think about one thing. I'm big on accountability and action. So think about one thing that you're taking away that you would like to do in the next week. Anything, literally anything from this webinar. You can drop it in the Q&A if you want, let people see, or just write it down somewhere. That's okay too. And I would love for anybody, I mean, there's a bunch of people here. It's like almost 100 people here. Send me an email in a week. Tell me what you're taking away. Tell me what you did. It's my contact info is at the end of the presentation. And I'd love to hear from you to see if you're making any changes in your practice. All right. Here we go. Looks like we have a couple of questions. And Sherry, you just tell me if I need to stop at like 2 minutes till, or if I can go right up till noon or what.
You can go right up till the end.
Okay, fantastic. So let's see, do you have any recommendations for conducting price analysis and or setting your rates? Yeah, great question. So you could do a formal price analysis. That might be overkill. Honestly, I would probably just search through any publicly available fee information in your area, like on Psychology Today or Just Googling psychologist websites, keep a spreadsheet, calculate an average, and then set your fee and go 10% above the average. It's a great place to start. If you don't have any people in your area with your specialty, that's a great indication that it's a premium service that is in high demand. So I would go 20% above the average in that case. And that should give you a good starting point, at least. There's so much to say about setting fees, but that's a simple way, I would say, to talk about price analysis and just setting fees initially. First steps to adding another practitioner or supervisee to your practice. I am not going to tackle that. That's a huge question. I will give you a resource, though, if you have not found a resource called the Group Practice Exchange. It's all about how to add practitioners and grow your practice. And she has a ton of resources in that community, and I would highly recommend you go check it out. Let's see. Kyle says, this is exactly where I'm at now to get started. Okay, love it, love it. Shoot me an email a week. Tina, what is the best way to find a good business coach? Yeah, I think about business coaching kind of like therapy, and it's an important relationship. So do some searching. These days, I think you should be able to do a pretty good search for like a private practice coach or a mental health practice coach or something like that. A lot of the top coaches will also have podcasts where you can get a sense of their style and their vibe, and then I would interview them, pick 2, 3, 4. See who you jive with, see who has an approach that makes the most sense to you. Some are going to be more like action driven, some are going to be more supportive, some are going to be more accountability driven, some, are big on numbers, some are big on relationship. It's like therapists. So I would interview a few and see who you work best with, and of course who's within your price range and who has your niche, what kind of practice you're running, and maybe start there. All right. Yeah. This is great. I know it was a lot, and again, totally okay to feel a little overwhelmed with the info. You don't have to do anything like tomorrow, but hopefully it'll sit with you, and maybe 1 or 2 seeds will get planted. One last question. Do you recommend networking with therapists and medical providers? 100%. I'm a big fan of warm relationships to build a practice. Google ads are great and they work, but I am a big fan of warm in-person relationships. Thank you all. A couple comments about it being helpful. That's awesome. That's so good to hear. Thanks for being here, y'all. This was awesome. Had a lot of fun.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Sharp, for sharing your expertise with us. And a big thank you to our participants for joining us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And this does conclude the webinar.